Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jamie Lavin, and I lead the local infrastructure hub for Bloomberg Philanthropies. On behalf of Mike Bloomberg and Jim Anderson, it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's session. This session is brought to you by our amazing partners at the U.S. Conference of Mayors and Results for America. Since we launched the local infrastructure hub in July of 2022, we've supported over 1,200 cities and towns to create ambitious, competitive applications for infrastructure funding through sessions like today's, curated resources, and deep dive technical assistance boot camps. Today, in celebration of 2 years since the historic bipartisan infrastructure law was signed by President Biden, we're going to discuss how to communicate the projects, infrastructure upgrades, and community improvements that your cities and towns are envisioning as a result of these investments. It's my pleasure to welcome Tom Cochrane, the CEO and Executive Director of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and a fantastic partner to the Zoom. Tom, it's all yours.
Thank you, Jamie, and thanks to Bloomberg Philanthropies and to Results for America for being such great partners in the hub. It seems almost impossible that we are celebrating today the second anniversary of the bipartisan infrastructure law. As I've said many times before, we labored decades to pass the national infrastructure law, but not until President Biden took office were we successful, and we are most grateful. This law is one of President Biden's many achievements, which also includes the American Rescue Plan, ARPA, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act. And many of you have told me you are drinking from a fire hose in terms of implementing these incredible transformational laws. But we must do more. As President Biden said, we ain't finished yet. It is critical that we take time to tell our story of how the infrastructure law projects are going to change lives, create jobs, and make life a hell of a lot easier for our residents. Our challenge is it takes time to plan and to construct infrastructure projects. So we got to find ways to remind the public over and over again just how important your infrastructure projects are to your economy. Today, I'm proud to have a stellar group of mayors to talk about the projects and how they promote them locally. But before we turn to our discussion, let me introduce our special guest, Tom Perez. He's a senior advisor and assistant to the president, and he's the director of the White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs. I won't go through Tom's numerous distinguished roles as a public servant, only to mention that he served as Secretary of Labor in the Obama administration. We worked very closely with him, and he's devoted his career to advocacy of civil rights, which is the Conference of Mayors has been there from the beginning. Tom, welcome to our session to celebrate the second anniversary of President Biden's infrastructure law. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Tom. Thanks for your partnership. It's always a pleasure to work with you and your colleagues at the Conference of Mayors. And good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are. I was going to acknowledge all the mayors, but I keep seeing more and more get on, so I know I'll forget someone or not see someone. So I do want to say thanks to all of you for joining, Jamie and others at Bloomberg. Thank you for what you have been doing. I've been so impressed by the seminars and the convenings that you do that we absconded with one of your senior people, and I want to acknowledge for the benefit of everyone, Ryan Whalen, who is on this Zoom call. And I noticed that heart, Jamie. I'm looking. And Ryan is a rock star, and Ryan is a resource to all of us. He's maybe sitting in a different chair, but he's in the same cause. He may be playing a slightly different instrument, but he's in the same orchestra, and that's that orchestra of opportunity for everyone. So thank you. I do, if I could, just I want to say a special thank you to Mayor Turner of Houston for your distinguished service. I had the privilege of doing a lot of work in Houston, especially during my tenure in the Obama administration. And Mayor Turner, thank you. Your legacy runs deep in the great city of Houston. So just wanted to shout you out today as someone who's just done some great stuff. I have the privilege right now, as Tom correctly pointed out, of leading the Office of Intergovernmental Affairs and working with our partners in the state, local, and tribal governments to address a host of issues. And, you know, I've said a number of times that it's really important in life to understand the moment we're living in, because if we don't understand the moment, then we won't meet the moment. And when that moment passes us by, we will look back with great regret. These last 2.5 years have seen unprecedented investments in infrastructure. We will never have more investments in our lifetime in infrastructure, I predict, than we do right now. This is an Eisenhower moment. It's an FDR moment. And it's a moment that's a result of President Biden, Vice President Harris's leadership. And in the case of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, a bipartisan group of elected officials who came together around really that once in a generation opportunity, funneling over $400 billion in roughly 40,000 projects into 4,500 communities throughout the country. I was out in Wausau, Wisconsin last week, breaking ground on a water project, connecting clean water pipes to a community for the first time, thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law. Just last week, we announced $16.4 billion from bill to repair and replace critical infrastructure along the Northeast Corridor, an unprecedented investment. And through this Investing in America agenda, as you know, the president is delivering on an infrastructure decade that will unlock access to economic opportunity and create good paying middle class jobs. It'll boost domestic manufacturing and grow the economy from the middle up and the bottom, the middle out and the bottom up, not the top down. That's what Joe Biden has been talking about, and that's what he's delivered on. And as Tom correctly said, it's really, really important to tell those stories. That's why I traveled to Wisconsin, as I mentioned last week, to talk about the $15 billion investment in pipes, so that we can replace the lead pipes across the country. We have to tell these stories early and often, and it has been my experience all too frequently that we haven't, frankly, we still have work to do on connecting these investments with communities, making sure people understand that this important bridge project, road project, school project, water project is a function of investments, because there's been a number of folks who have lost a little bit of faith in government to deliver the basics. And I think through things like the bipartisan infrastructure law, we can restore that faith in government, both local government, state government, and federal government's ability to get the job done. And that's why we need your help. And that's why this convening is so important. Nobody knows better than how to communicate with communities than all of you. You're trusted leaders in your communities. And we want to amplify your tweets and include them in roundups that we're putting together on Wednesday of this week. Well, we're really trying hard to produce stories and photos about how the bipartisan infrastructure law impacts every community across this country. So I hope you'll shoot our team a note, a tweet, a photo. We are going to have more, signs up to make sure that communities understand how these projects came to pass. It wasn't fairy dust. It wasn't dumb luck. It was the result of very conscious investments. And so I look forward here to really hearing your insights on how you're communicating with your residents about these infrastructure projects and what methods you found particularly effective in conveying these priorities, things that you thought were going to be a good idea that maybe weren't such a good idea, things we need to scale up. I'm a chronic kleptomaniac. I talk to friends who are doing smart things. I try to steal them, and then I pretend that they were my idea after a while. So that's what we're trying to do. So Jamie, thank you for your leadership at Bloomberg. Tom, thank you for your leadership at the Conference of Mayors. I will now turn it back to you, Jamie, to get the conversation going. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you so much. And we'll forgive you for stealing Ryan for the good cause. So now we really want to bring you into conversation with these mayors who are leading these great projects. So I'm going to get right to it. We're going to welcome Mayor Bibb of Cleveland, Ohio, Mayor Hovland of Edina, Minnesota, Mayor Patricia Locke Dawson of Riverside, California, Mayor Larry and Gaylor Baird of Lincoln, Nebraska, and Mayor Sylvester Turner of Houston, Texas, into the conversation. And we're so glad we got you, Mayor Turner, before you leave office. I know that Mayor Turner and Senior Advisor Perez need to leave us about halfway through the program, so we're going to jump right in. Thank you all for being here today. I think first I'm going to give the floor to Mayor Turner, because you've been just killing it in pulling down infrastructure funds. You pulled down over $50 million of infrastructure funding to build this incredible legacy for Houstonians. How are you telling Houstonians about that and making sure that they understand what these projects are all about?
Thank you for having me, and Jamie, Tom, and thank you all for your very gracious comments. To all other mayors, let me say hello to everybody. Let me start off by saying that even before we applied for the bipartisan infrastructure law funds, we've had a lot of community engagement. I think what mayors would tell you, a lot of these projects are things that we have applied for, were already on the books. We just didn't have the funding to make it happen because the needs that exist in our cities have existed there for quite some time. And so a lot of community engagement leading up to these projects, attending a lot of town hall meetings, CIP programs, just didn't have the funding, telling people, you have to wait and we'll try to get to them. And then when the funding became available through the bipartisan infrastructure law, we were ready to apply for them. And what we attempted, and we had a number of initiatives prior to, Vision Zero, for example, for our street programs. It was already on the books. We established what we call complete communities. We're looking at communities where there had been a lack of investment, infrastructure investment for decades. That was on the books. And so when it came along, it happened. I just want to highlight just two ones, and we've been very successful with the applications. I would tell you we're still looking for more, but I'll save that for another day. I just kind of want to put that out. But the first of the city of Houston, we applied for and we were awarded a Safe Street and Road SWAL grant in 2022 with a total federal request of $28.79 million, which we received. The Bissonnette Corridor Safe Streets project will directly support the city of Houston's Vision Zero mission, which was there, by providing resources to improve safety for one of the most dangerous corridors across the city, the Bissonnette Street. In fact, it's one of the most dangerous corridors in the entire state of Texas. The Bissonnette Street tops our high injury network with a kill or serious injury rating of 22 per year and more, covering 18 miles. And so with this funding of $28.79 million, it not only addresses this segment, but quite frankly, it will transform this area for the better, not just for the short term, but for the long term. The other one that I would like to highlight very quickly, the city of Houston also applied for and was awarded a railroad crossing elimination grant with a federal funding request of $36.9 million. Now, let me just say, this is part of a bigger project of about $100 million, but we were falling short. We were short of that 36.9. This program provides funding for highway rail or pathway rail grade crossing improvement projects that focus on the safety and mobility of people and goods. Phase 1 includes the construction of 4 underpasses and closure of 4 at-grade crossings to eliminate 7 existing at-grade crossings and reconstruct 1 underpass to current standard. We have been talking about this project in the East End, heavily populated by the Hispanic community, for years. Trains were stopping, not for 15 minutes, not for 1 or 2 hours. These trains were literally stopping anywhere from 3 to 6 hours during the period of the day. And what was happening is that kids and others, they were going underneath the trains to try to get to the other side. And can you imagine now with this project getting going, and they've been waiting and saying to the mayor, you got to do something. This is unacceptable. And now the project is taking place. And when the announcement was made, it was well attended by federal leaders, state leaders, local leaders, community activists. We asked all of them to convey what was taking place here. And we made sure we tagged the bipartisan infrastructure law and tagged the Biden-Harris administration for making it happen. So it's not just one and done in terms of communicating, it's over and over and over again. And lastly, the Houston Public Works Department, I had them to set up what we call a web page on engagehouston.org, engagehouston.org, which specifically focuses on the city's federal funding for projects. So it is a one-stop shop for the public to learn about our application for grants. And then we have our Houston Federal Update, which is from our government relations team that entails Houston's opera, bipartisan infrastructure law, earmarks, and the advisory efforts. So through the engagehouston.org webpage and the Federal Update, that provides in real time, in a very transparent way, information to the general public. And then I tell all of my PIOs and all of my 23 departments, you will tag it and you will emphasize the bipartisan infrastructure law, and you will emphasize that but for this funding, these projects would not be taking place, and you will associate that directly with the Biden-Harris administration. So we're very appreciative, and we think it's very important for us to communicate, and these projects will be transformational. That's in a nutshell.
Thank you so much, Mayor Turner. I think you covered a lot of our strategies there in talking about these projects, you know, and finding those messengers, right? It doesn't have to just be the city doing the communicating. It shouldn't just be the city, right? That you're working with other stakeholders. Let's bring Mayor Hovland into the conversation. Tell us about how you're approaching the infrastructure investments in Edina and talking about your success as well.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. First of all, I wanted to just segue off of what Tom had to say about Sylvester, about Mayor Turner. I think organizationally, the USCM is going to miss him tremendously. For me personally, he's just been a wonderful person to be around, regardless of whether he was a mayor. He's just a first-class human being, and I'm going to miss him a great deal personally. I know our organization will miss him too, and it'll be I'll regret not seeing him there in January. So thank you, Mayor Turner, for all those great years of service.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for thinking of it too, Tom, from an administration standpoint. That was really generous of you. You know, in our North Country, we got an expression up here, don't quit or complain about it, just fix it. And that's what I think President Biden and his administration, Tom, part of that team, that leadership that made the bipartisan infrastructure framework work, made it possible. Taking on I would call it a long admired problem that nobody did anything about, and took this underfunded critical element of our economy and is starting to work on it. And well, we're halfway through this process, and we've got some really great things to talk about around the country. And so in our part of the world, Minnesota's had hundreds of millions of dollars come in because of the IIJA all over the state, and in the metropolitan area where I am, we've had some really interesting projects, and there's a variety of things that you've talked about already: intersection projects, expansion projects, non-motorized, motorized projects, bridges. But one of the key things that we've talked about, and the president's really been concerned about all the way along, has been equity. And I wanted to focus on that in terms of what's one of the projects that's underway in the Twin Cities area, and that's this Reconnect Rondo project. So when the interstate highway system was built in the 60s through the Twin Cities, between Minneapolis and St. Paul, they just plowed through this Rondo neighborhood, and they lost 700 of their homes, 61% of their residents, 48% of their home ownership, close to $160 million worth of equity value. And so all these years later, now we're trying to fix something, and it's been voluntary generated in terms of its activity at the beginning. They want to have a community land bridge created across the highway, and we're working on that now with this I-94 reconstruction project. There's 5 or 6 different options on that. And this neighborhood eventually will be connected again by a community land bridge. And they want to form out of that an African American cultural enterprise district. What of course they worry about on the land bridge side of it is that this whole area will get gentrified. And they want to make sure that people that live there now can stay there. And so this whole notion of creating this African American cultural enterprise district speaks to that notion of how they would go about doing that. And so in the world of telling stories, there's a great story to be told, and I won't go further into the detail of it now because there are other speakers that want to speak about projects. But equity is a really high priority in the Minneapolis-St. Paul region. I think particularly since the killing of George Floyd, it focused us on reorienting our practices and policies. We've got a great federal partner now with new resources to help us. We've got people like Tom Perez, and then our own colleagues from days gone by, Mitch Landrieu and Steve Benjamin, there to help as well, and offering ready assistance to all the mayors. So I'll maybe speak a little bit later about leading the Standing Committee on Transportation. We've got a lot of work to do. To the point, the question that you raised, Jamie, just quickly, I'll say, when you formed the local infrastructure hub, we came back to the Twin Cities and asked our regional economic development entity, Greater MSP, to do the same thing from an informational standpoint, and they've done that. And now I think with 2 years left to go, we really need to be better at communicating the opportunities here. I've also had meetings with our state DOT. I'd like to have them help fund and set up an infrastructure hub to make sure that cities throughout our state know about the opportunities here and don't miss out on this last 2 years of great opportunity to get the things done that they need to get done in their particular part of the state. So that's it for me from Minnesota.
That's quite a lot, Mayor Hovland. I think it's really important what you touched on there, that we're focusing on how this money coming in is going to be, a boon for the city. But sometimes residents don't feel that, and they actually get worried about how it's going to impact them. So it's really important to address those fears and those concerns. Maybe that's a great time to turn it over to Mayor Bibb. We'd love to talk to you about how you're thinking about this, making sure that you're bringing that equitable lens to your infrastructure vision and telling your story.
Well, I would be remiss as a fellow alpha man not to give my flowers to the great Mayor Sylvester Turner for his amazing leadership. As a relatively new mayor, he has just been an amazing advisor to me as I've taken the helm in Cleveland. So I'm so sad to see him leave his role as mayor of Houston, but I look forward to hopefully playing some golf with him sometime soon when I get a free weekend here to come down to Houston. A lot's already been said about the great work that this president and vice president has delivered on as it relates to the infrastructure investments we're all benefiting from in our respective cities. I think there are a couple points I want to just tee up for this conversation. I think one, the importance of collaboration. Unlike ARPA, we as mayors have to work very closely with our state transit officials, our governors, and members of our state legislatures to ensure that we have the right priorities as it relates to being competitive for these critical infrastructure investments. And so we've been very focused on collaborating with our federal lobbyists, our state lobbyists, and our state delegation to ensure that the right projects are prioritized as we compete for this historic amount of federal funding. The other thing I would also say, it is so important that when we talk about these investments, that we talk about them in a way that's going to connect with the everyday lived experiences of our residents. And, it's easy for us to go down a very fancy policy conversation and talk track. But for our residents, particularly in Cleveland, who don't have enough money to pay their utility bills, who don't have enough money to pay for that monthly bus pass, who don't have enough money to repair their kitchen or repair their garage. They want to know how these investments are going to make their lives better tomorrow. And that's been our focus here in Cleveland. So we've focused on a couple of big projects. Number one, we received over $19 million to replace all the lead service lines in our daycare centers across the city. And so far, we've been able to replace over 4,000 lead service lines all across the city of Cleveland. I talked about transit access and transit justice, because in many ways, this is an issue of racial justice here in Cleveland. For many of our residents, they can't afford to have a car. And we're lucky as a city to have an amazing regional bus and rail authority in our community that gives residents access to high quality and frequent public transit. So with the support of Senator Sherrod Brown and Congresswoman Shontel Brown, we were able to land over $130 million from the Department of Transportation through the bipartisan infrastructure bill to replace all of our rail cars in our fleet. And over the next several years, we'll fully replace every single rail car throughout the greater Cleveland area to ensure that we can provide safe, reliable, equitable public transit all across our city and our region. And, I think one of the biggest things we've been talking about so far this afternoon is how do we tell the story? How do we show people that these investments are here and are happening in our respective cities? So one thing I told my director of public works to do was every time we're putting shovels on the ground or doing a new project in our city, we have a big sign that talks about ARPA or the bipartisan infrastructure law and how this president and this vice president have made these investments possible. So we got to keep telling our story. We got to prioritize the projects that really impact the lived experiences of our residents. And we have to collaborate in a very intentional way to make sure we can get as much money as we possibly can rolling from our state partners as well, too.
Thank you, Mayor Bibb. So important to talk about that immediacy and just helping people realize that these investments are actually going to make a difference in their lives, and in the lives sometimes of our most needy and vulnerable residents, as children in daycare centers. Mayor Gaylor Baird, I'd love to toss it next to you to hear about how you're approaching this in Lincoln and anything that you're doing that might be different from the mayors we've heard about so far.
Well, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Jamie, and to all the folks at Bloomberg. And I want to especially thank my fellow mayors who are presenting on this call and tuning in for the inspiration and wisdom they're sharing, and as well as our CEO and Executive Director, Tom Cochran, for his leadership at the U.S. Conference of Mayors and bringing us together. And thank you especially to you, Tom Perez, because I had the opportunity to sit down with you at our fall leadership Conference of Mayors gathering, and you gave me some great advice about how to strengthen ties with federal agencies, and I'm really grateful for that time then, the time you're giving us today, and your ongoing partnership. The White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs and their colleagues has been really remarkably accessible to my team here in Lincoln, and I want to give them a lot of credit for helping us be successful. They've been really accessible not only to us here in Lincoln, but to local governments across the country as we try to navigate this complex array of new federal resources authorized by the bipartisan infrastructure law. And I'm so pleased to share that last summer, the city of Lincoln was awarded a $23.7 million RAISE grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation to complete the planning and construction of the Lincoln Multimodal Transit Center. And this $23.7 million RAISE grant represents the largest federal discretionary grant award made to the city of Lincoln in our history. And it was not the first time we'd applied for this funding, not the second time, not the third time, not the fourth time, not even the fifth time, not even the sixth time we'd applied. It was the seventh time we'd applied. And, you might say seven times the charm, or it's a lucky number, but it wasn't really about luck. And I think that's what we are all trying to talk about on this call. There was a lot of intentional investment that went into making the funds possible. I mean, as a city, we'd received really helpful debriefings from DOT following our failed past submissions, and those helped to inform the improvements we made to our application. We also had done the work, as Mayor Turner suggested. We had done a lot of work. We'd spoken with bus riders and drivers and our citizen advisory committee, and worked with stakeholders across our community. We were ready for this application, but I firmly believe that just historic levels of investment that were authorized by the bipartisan infrastructure law, coupled with the guidance that we received from the Federal Transit Administration and all the local alignment that our policy objectives had with the goals of the Biden-Harris administration, those were the critical factors that resulted in the city of Lincoln finally securing our full funding ask for this project. And why is this project important? This multimodal transit center is going to be the cornerstone of a broader revitalization effort in our downtown corridor. And once completed, the center will expand multimodal transportation options for our residents and provide connections, help people get to jobs and school and the doctor's office. It'll help job seekers. It's going to help move commerce through our community. It's really going to be important to our local economy. And we also were able to show intersectional benefits. The federal investment in our transit center is going to also advance the goals of our city's climate action plan. As we work to electrify our transit fleet by 2040, we're going to have new in-route charging stations for electric buses and a rooftop solar array, LED lighting, drought-resilient landscaping. This new facility also will offer better working conditions for our drivers and new amenities for them, as well as the general public. So we were able to make the case and align our goals with those of the administration and the bipartisan infrastructural law's intentions. And that historic investment really made this possible. And then earlier this year, we were awarded a $400,000 grant through the inaugural round of the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program to support the creation of our Vision Zero action plan. And that plan is going to be a key component of our local Safe Streets for All initiative. And it's a goal that we've set to eliminate the fatalities and reduce serious crashes on our roads by 60% by the year 2045. And from the moment that we learned we had been selected to receive both the RAISE grant and the Vision Zero action planning grant funds because of the bipartisan infrastructure law resources, we did work to ensure that all of our community members understood the significance of these investments and how the projects would benefit them personally. So just for example, when the announcement for the RAISE and Safe Streets for All grants were made public, I convened press briefings with our department so we could really articulate that and communicate the benefits of the projects, not just us to residents, but we brought residents in and included them in our press briefings. And in those briefings, we directly acknowledged our federal partners, including Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg in those remarks. We also utilized all our social media platforms to share the announcements with members of the community. And with other federal grant awards, we've had the good fortune of welcoming other federal officials to join us for major announcements. So earlier this year, we welcomed former Labor Secretary Marty Walsh to the opening of an American Job Center in Lincoln that was funded with investment from the American Rescue Plan Act. And I extended that invitation to the former secretary at the U.S. Conference of Mayors winter meeting last year, and my team then followed up with a formal letter of invitation to his team at DOL. So Secretary Walsh made the trip to Nebraska in February. That shows how committed he was to being on the ground. And we held a ribbon cutting ceremony, and he offered remarks to a local audience. And my team developed a full day schedule of programming to showcase how youth were going to benefit from local education and workforce development programs. So hosting our federal partners here on the ground is a great way to demonstrate how decisions in Washington, D.C. directly impact our residents and our neighborhoods. I think, given the context of Congress, the national discourse, it's really easy for that message to get lost in the shuffle. So I agree with all my fellow mayors how important it is that we remind our constituents that local officials should always strive to have a really effective working relationship with intergovernmental partners, regardless of political affiliation, for the benefit of the community itself. And so as we continue to do that work, since we are continuing to communicate about what's been made possible by the bipartisan infrastructure law, we have undertaken a robust community engagement effort as we develop and implement these projects. Like, every stage of the project offers you a new chance to shout from the rooftops about how great the work is that we're doing and how made possible it was by federal funds. We have presented a series of meetings to inform the community about the Multimodal Transportation Center. We're doing comprehensive public engagement in the design stage, having charrettes, inviting the public. We're going to be visiting our cultural centers, meeting with small groups of folks who are directly impacted by the project. We're presenting at local organizations, and we're going to be hosting larger in-person and virtual public open houses. And then, because we know how helpful it can be to have federal folks on the ground, if our project remains on the anticipated timeline, we intend to invite Secretary Buttigieg and our Region 7 FDA partners to Lincoln a year from now to do the reveal of the final design and kick off the construction phase. Again, taking each stage of the project as a new opportunity to lift up the real public value that it has. So we'll continue with social media platforms to do those updates, continue to engage with the community, and to use our platform for public input and discussion. And before I wrap, I do want to acknowledge our employees at the City of Lincoln for all their hard work on seizing these opportunities and securing the funding. Internal capacity is always a factor in how able local governments are to take advantage of these opportunities. And so here in Lincoln, as a city of 290,000 residents, we do have the good fortune of having a sizable staff and a full-time grant writer. And within the mayor's office, I also appointed a team member to oversee cross-departmental efforts associated with the BIL. I remember Mitch Landrieu coming to us at the U.S. Conference of Mayors and saying, "Put together your infrastructure roundtable." You guys can hear his Southern twang in your memories. And so we did that. We took that advice, and that has also helped us to be in good communication internally and externally. So I'll just pause there, but thank you again so much for having me be a part of this really important discussion.
Thank you so much, Mayor Gary-LaBerre. I think some of the key takeaways, I think one is really thinking about those planning grants. I might return to this point with all of you. If you've been fortunate enough to get a planning grant, it's not shovels in the ground. So how do you communicate about that? So we might return to that. And then that piece about recognizing your team that worked really hard to pull down these dollars, I think is such a key one. I want to get to Mayor Loch Dawson. Mayor Loch Dawson, I know Riverside has been ambitious in its infrastructure plans. Can you tell me a little bit about how you're communicating that ambition and where you're headed?
Sure. Thank you, Jamie. And thanks everybody for being here today. I appreciate the opportunity to share some of the great things going on in Riverside. We're the biggest city you've probably never heard of. We're in Southern California. We're the 12th largest city in the state, which means we're bigger than most 1 or 2 cities in other states. So we're bigger than about 99% of all the cities in the country. But we're just about halfway between Palm Springs and LA, if you don't know where we are. But one of the things I want to talk a little bit about is we've got some transportation money for at-grade crossings to try to change that, right, to do a grade separation. And I want to set the context for it, though, because I think it's really important to understand why it's so important to our community. Riverside is arguably has some of the worst air quality in the nation, and we are ground zero for emissions research and also environmental justice initiatives, because of course the communities that have been impacted the most are communities of color that are next to some of our biggest rail lines and our freeways. So it's been critical for us to try to, I think it was perhaps, I'm not sure, was it Mayor Bibb that was talking about, or or maybe Mayor Turner, about the length of time some of these railroads stay and the cars that are stopped right at these grades. So We've got this last year, we were awarded $15 million in Federal Railroad Administration dollars for grade separation as part of an $86 million project that is going to put in 3 new miles of track, 2 miles of vehicle lanes, half mile of sidewalks, and a big bridge. Of course, we need the bridge, right? So that'll be there too. And that's going to help reduce some of those emissions around and impacting those neighborhoods around there, which is hugely important to us. And it also creates a more safe environment. We've had a number of deaths at that particular crossing, either by accident or people committing suicide. It's just an ugly little crossing we need to fix. Well, I say little, it's 6 lanes wide, so it's not little. So we also have another one out. We're waiting. If I saw Tom had to hop off, but we do have a $60 million request out right now in the Reconnecting Communities and Neighborhoods grant. And we are hoping that we get that the gods of the infrastructure law smile favorably upon us. It's for another bridge replacement and also with similar issues. So, but real quick, Jamie, you asked about how do we get the word out? And that is one thing I think Riverside does a pretty good job at. We have a really great Office of Communications. We've got 18 people working in there doing web, video, social, photography, all kinds of stuff. And one of the things we do is put out something called the Explore Riverside magazine, which is, it goes out to 112,000 residents and a whole bunch of businesses. But the very front pages of this year's, the one that's coming in January, has all the information about the grade separation money and that it came from the infrastructure law. And, you know, it's getting the information out there about that, about the grants we've received and what we're putting out there. It's available online. And we also put things out on social media. We generally invite our congressional leaders to come and participate when we have ribbon cutting. And I'll commit now to do that. And members of the White House, if they'd like to be here as well, when we do our grade separation final. But you also asked perhaps for challenges, and let me just share very briefly. Language access in our community is very important. I think it's important to a lot of communities. We are a dominant community, Latino, with a lot of Spanish speakers. So we really need a language access unit. You know, it's expensive to put things out in different languages. We're able to do it digitally with our social media and our digital online magazine. But I think what would be nice is to be able to have it across all platforms, everything we do, because I think it's so important that we get this information out about all the great things that are going on. And lastly, the other project that we are not direct recipients of, but we will be at some point, State of California just got $1.2 billion from the Department of Energy for a hydrogen hub, which is a big deal here in California. We got a whole bunch of money, and the Biden administration just put out for clean energy grants. Riverside has the #1 green fleet in the nation in our city. So we will be taking advantage of the opportunities to access those funds as well. And can't wait to tell you all about that one when it comes to fruition. So I'll stop there. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Mayor Luckdustin. And I love calling upon the infrastructure gods. I think there's been a lot of prayers to them lately. I want to invite David Medina from Results for America into the conversation because, as you've all talked about, there's a lot of great work that you do to apply for a grant with community engagement as a big piece of that. You also put together a lot of data. I want to hear your reflections, David, as we know Results for America has had a long focus on using data to drive decision making. How can it fit into a communication strategy?
Well, Jamie, thanks to you and Jim, the Bloomberg team. Thanks to Tom and the U.S. Conference of Mayors for a great partnership to date. Thank you, and thanks for the question. You know, according to the Pew Research Center, only 27% of Americans right now believe that government is working well. But the good news is that 72% of Americans supported government investments in infrastructure spending when the bipartisan infrastructure law was being debated. So both of those polling results should remind all of us here today that developing and sharing compelling and user-friendly stories about your infrastructure projects and sharing those with your residents, they not only help build support for those projects, they're also helping restore trust in government. And so, as others have noted today, and that storytelling begins when you're developing and submitting your federal grant application. I think all the mayors who've spoken today have really focused in on the most important data points. And, I'm here, Results for America's here, just as a reminder that you shouldn't inundate your grant applications with data, but just focus on those that really help make your case that the funding you're seeking is going to help make your residents and your communities more effective, more efficient by reducing the number of traffic accidents and fatalities, by shortening commuter times, and by connecting people to jobs and nature and entertainment. But the storytelling doesn't just end there when you submit your application. I'm here to remind all of us to keep telling that story over and over again to your residents. And a great example of good storytelling, great storytelling, is a video that was created recently by the city of Albuquerque in support of its rail trail project. And we're going to post a link to that video in the chat for all of you to take a look at. Here's some of the main reasons why that video is so effective. First, it's a video. It's not a 200-page report. Second, it's only 92 seconds long. It's not a cable televised 2-hour town hall meeting. Third, it features local business and government leaders supporting Albuquerque's rail project. Fourth, it highlights over and over again in 92 seconds how this project is going to help build connections and connectivity among Albuquerque communities. So I really encourage all of you to take a look at that video. It might just inspire some other ways that you can tell your story with your message in your communities. And all of us here at Results for America are ready, willing, and able to help you tell those stories in partnership with Bloomberg Philanthropies and the U.S. Conference of Mayors. So thanks again to all of you for the important work you're doing.
Thank you, David. And thanks for highlighting the video. I think, as Mayor Lochdossen was talking about, and as all of our mayors talked about, getting to people in multiple ways, different channels. We know language access can be a barrier. I know there's some experimentation being done about AI, which we, encourage experimentation, but check it, make sure the message is actually the right message. If you're going to use AI to supplement your language capabilities. Want to hear, we're as usual, when we have these sessions, always running short on time. So let's take 1 minute each. If you wouldn't mind, just what advice do you have for mayors? What have you found that's worked in helping people, like being able to actually see what's going to happen in their communities, what's going to change? I'm going to start with, we'll go in reverse order. Start with you, Mayor Lochdossen.
I think the community involvement is key, right? Is bringing them out, making them feel part of the process and they're part of a winning team. But having them at the table in the planning process with community meetings, and then bring them back, let them know what their work did, right? What their ideas and what their input have done, so that they too can share in the, share in the glory of the finished product. And I have to say, I think social media is the way to go these days. That's almost exclusively all we use. So thank you.
Thank you. And I might just, even though I'm asking everyone to keep it short, I might just say, and when you think about how to bring people in, think about what actually works for their schedules and like making it in their community with some childcare, with the right transportation, right? So that people can actually participate. How about you, Mayor Gaylor Baird? What are you finding to be effective in getting your message out?
We had a great press conference on the steps of a school where we had done school safety zone improvements. And we had students who were with us. We had parents who were with us, parents who had been a part of the process of informing the design of the improvements, who got up and had the most powerful testimony of all. We were really there to just scaffold their understanding of what had been changed and to lift up where the resources came from. But they talked about the public value for them. And I think when you can share your platform with other people. And that not only kind of diffuses the politics, but it builds trust in the community. It creates a more integrated communication.
You know, the way to my heart as PTA president, I love hearing getting the parents involved. How about you, Mayor Bibb? What are you finding to be the most effective way to communicate, maybe with the people who don't tune into the City of Cleveland, Twitter channel?
Well, just last week we hosted a town hall at my grandmother's church, and it was a really good way to give residents an update on all the progress we're making, leveraging this historic federal investment. The other thing I want to kind of make sure folks recognize as an early lesson learned from our administration, none of this work gets done if you don't have capable people inside City Hall to execute. And so having the right capacity and making sure you don't apply for every source of funding from the federal government, but the sources that make the most sense, given your capacity constraints, is something that we must take heed to ensure that these projects are successful and have the impact that we all want them to have.
That's so important, the prioritization that needs to happen. And because one of the big things that the federal government keeps telling us over and over again they're looking at is, will this project actually happen? That is like one of the number one things they consider when they review your application, because they don't want to give you the money and then get it back. How about you, Mayor Hovland?
I think people can help you weave the dream if you give them a chance. And so how do you give them a chance? Well, there's a lot of good ideas that have been advanced here, a lot of ideas that are common to all of our communities, I think, but this public engagement through a variety of techniques, including social media. We do small area or neighborhood conversations. In certain circumstances, we've done tabletop exercises, even floor exercises with massive maps of areas where people can walk around on the top of the map, and this is what they'd like here, this is what they'd like to see there in a particular location. All of those sort of opportunities are important, but as you point out, Jamie, getting younger people there that have families that are have responsibilities at home and trying to get kids to bed by 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, it's tough. So you've got to figure out where your opportunities lie for getting engagement across generations, not just people that are retired and able to come to these meetings and have a point of view that may not be consistent with what younger people may have. So you just have to think broadly about how to engage each generation.
I love that. And I want to hire those people who can get their kids to bed at 7. Maybe the last question, if we can, I think we could do it quickly. For those of you who have applied for or received planning grants, we know planning has to happen. How do you communicate about a planning grant? Because it's not, there's nothing that's going to happen at the end of that. Anyone want to raise their hand or jump in? Mayor Bibb's on it.
I forgot to use the Zoom icon. Sorry.
You're good. No, I like
totally
the
forgot
physical,
about it.
the handwork.
One of the really cool things that we've been using is old school campaign tactic, robocalls. So what we do is in the wards in which we're using the funding for the planning grant, we do robocalls and mailers, and really kind of go door to door to encourage residents to show up to a planning grant meeting to get their feedback.
Great. About anyone else?
To say that we're working on, in a transition to digital storytelling in our city communications division, we're working on building out our photo libraries. We're looking at making short videos. Our video team is used to doing the hour show that they put on Access. We're trying to, it took a while, but we got them to stop filming everything this way and make it so it's on a phone. So we're making some hard transitions, but they're in support of being able to be more nimble and pulling from, a library of imagery, because so often the visuals really help for people in understanding what's coming, particularly with a planning grant. We can be on the steps of the school, show them what an improvement example would be like, and talk about how the planning grant will facilitate more similar school zone improvements across every quadrant of the city. So that's sort of how we're approaching it.
Yeah, for all of us visual learners. Mayor Locke Dawson, I'm going to give you the last word on this.
I love visuals and showing what can be. I think that's been, if you can show folks a vision, a rendering of what will happen when they get involved. And, you know, architects are fabulous at this, right? They always show what things are going to be. It gets people excited because many people cannot imagine, you know, they don't have the vision to see what their input will end up being. So that's important to me. I always like to have a picture with everything. For me too, I need it. So
I agree. I love those renderings, right? And then hopefully the reality will wind up coming at least close to the rendering. Thank you, Mayor, so much for your time. Thank you, David. We are going to launch a poll while I tell you about a few things we have coming up. Please participate in the poll. It helps us know how to help your communities, what kinds of information we can provide, resources. So please participate. Next, I'm also putting in the chat, we have created a toolkit to help those cities who are either you know, in their messaging journey or just getting started. It's really about, here are some strategies and resources, sample messages, some imagery, graphics to get you started. So I just put that into the chat. So I encourage you all to check it out, to share it with your communications teams. I know some cities have communications teams, some are smaller, and you know, it's a one-man operation or one-woman operation. You might be the communicator. So check that out. We have a few sessions coming up. One is on November 28th. It's going to be talking about how, if you're a capacity constrained community, which is all communities, are you able to effectively apply for these infrastructure funding programs? We know they're competitive. We heard from Mayor Gaylor-Badd, sometimes it takes multiple rounds to get the funding. How do you get started? And so we're going to be talking about that. And then we're also hosting a session on cybersecurity. We know more and more of city government is moving onto the cloud appropriately. How do you protect it and make sure that your city is well prepared, and there's funding for that. So we encourage you all to check out those opportunities. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're inspired by the work that you're doing. We're excited to partner with you. We want to support you. You can reach out to me. I'm going to put my email in the chat. If you want to share what you're doing on infrastructure, we are excited to help you. We can sometimes find great channels and resources and reporters in your area who care about the work that you're doing and want to elevate it. So please do reach out, and we will see you at our next session. Thank you, and happy 2nd anniversary to the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law.
thank you. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Enjoy
Bye,
your
everybody.
stay.
Happy Thanksgiving.
All right.